Christmas markets have always held a special magic for me. The shimmering lights, the cheerful carols, and the enticing smell of roasted chestnuts in the frosty air. Back in 1935, my hometown of Aldershire boasted the most enchanting market of all. Locals lovingly called it Starry Square because at night it felt like the stars themselves descended to join the festivities. On Christmas Eve that year, the square was alive with laughter and excitement. Parents rushed to grab last-minute gifts. Children darted about with sticky candy-coated faces, and vendors sang out cheerful greetings. My younger brother Peter, just 6 years old, tugged at my hand incessantly, begging me to take him to the House of Dreams, the beloved toy store famous for its Christmas puppet shows. Walking into the store was like stepping into another world. Rows of wooden trains, delicate porcelain dolls, and plush animals gleamed under fairy lights draped across the ceiling. Peter's eyes widened with wonder as we made our way through the crowd, gathering around the puppet stage. It was packed, the room buzzing with anticipation. The show began, and for a moment, time stood still. The puppets danced and twirled, their strings invisible in the glow of the lights. Peter giggled beside me, utterly entranced. But then it happened. A sharp pop echoed from the back of the store, startling the crowd. At first we thought it was part of the performance, but then came the smell, a sharp, acrid stench of burning plastic and wires. My stomach knotted as I saw a spark leap from the tangled fairy lights, landing on a pile of colorful wrapping paper stacked near the stage. In an instant, flames erupted, climbing hungrily toward the ceiling. Panic swept through the room like a wave. People screamed and shoved, desperate to escape. The festive decorations, once so beautiful, became fuel for the fire, turning the House of Dreams into a nightmare. "Emily, what's happening?" Peter whimpered, clutching my hand tightly. His small voice trembled with fear. "Stay with me," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart pounded as I searched for a way out. The front entrance was a bottleneck, choked with panicked customers struggling to push through. Flames licked at the wooden beams overhead, sending down embers that stung like tiny knives. "Over here!" a voice shouted. Turning, I saw George, a store employee, waving us toward a back corner. His face was streaked with soot, but his calm determination was like a beacon of hope. He was pulling aside boxes to reveal a small hidden door. I gripped Peter's hand and fought through the crush of bodies, my lungs burning from the thickening smoke. When we reached George, the door was stuck. George grabbed a metal rod and began prying it open, his movements frantic but focused. I joined him despite my shaking hands, and together we wrenched the door free. "Go!" George shouted, ushering us through. The door opened into a narrow alley, already hazy with smoke but blissfully cold. The sharp winter air felt like salvation against my searing lungs. Peter coughed beside me, his small chest heaving. I pulled my scarf from my neck and wrapped it around his face, trying to shield him from the smoke. "Just a little farther," I urged him, though my own voice was raw and hoarse. A firefighter appeared at the end of the alley, his helmet glinting in the firelight. "This way," he called, waving us forward. I clung to Peter as we stumbled toward safety. Behind us, the fire roared louder, consuming the store and all its treasures. When we reached the square, it was unrecognizable. What had been a bustling hub of joy hours earlier was now a scene of devastation. The heat from the flames radiated even from a distance. Families huddled together, many crying out for loved ones still trapped inside. And then I saw him, George. He emerged from the alley carrying a little girl in his arms. Her dress was singed, her face tear-streaked, but she was alive. George handed her off to a firefighter, but before he could follow, a deafening crack echoed through the square. The store's roof collapsed in a shower of embers, swallowing George in its fiery grip. My scream was lost in the chaos. By the next morning, the square was eerily quiet. The fire had claimed 32 lives, including George and 2 brave firefighters. The charred remains of the House of Dreams stood as a grim reminder of what we had lost. My family and I stood in the square, staring at the wreckage, the weight of grief pressing down on us. The mayor promised swift action, and for once, he delivered. An investigation revealed the cause: faulty wiring and overcrowding, a disaster waiting to happen. But the town didn't just grieve, it acted. We raised money to rebuild the square, this time with proper safety measures: fireproof decorations, clear emergency exits, and sprinkler systems. A memorial was erected in the center of the square, engraved with the names of those we lost. Every Christmas since, my family has left flowers there for George, the man who saved us. I think about that night often, about how fragile life is and how quickly everything can change. Peter grew up, started a family, and never forgot the firefighter and the store employee who became our heroes. As for me, I turned my fear into purpose. Today I work to ensure public spaces are safe, inspecting wiring, organizing fire drills, and doing everything I can to prevent another tragedy. So if you're reading this, take it from me. Don't take safety for granted, because the magic of Christmas isn't in the lights or the gifts. It's in the people we love, and we owe it to them to keep them safe. Let's make sure the stars stay where they belong, shining down on us from above, not consumed in flames below. Man, this was supposed to be the perfect Christmas. Melissa and I had been talking about getting away for months, and we finally did it. We rented this little cabin in the Catskills, tucked way out in the woods. It looked amazing in the pictures. Snow-covered trees, a cozy fireplace, and even a hot tub on the deck. Perfect, right? We got there just as the sun was setting. The snow was already coming down pretty hard, and the cabin looked even better than the pictures. There was this big porch with rocking chairs, Christmas lights strung along the railings, and a wreath on the door. It felt like we'd walked straight into a Christmas card. Inside was even better. There was a fully decorated tree in the corner, stockings hanging from the mantel, and this warm, woodsy smell like cedar or pine. Melissa was in love with the place instantly. "This is it," she said, kicking off her boots. "I'm never leaving." The first hour or so was great. We unpacked, explored the cabin, and laughed about how we didn't need half the stuff we'd brought. The upstairs had a little loft with a pool table and some board games, and there were 3 bedrooms, way more space than we needed. The basement, though, that was a whole other vibe. I went down there to check it out, and it was freezing. The lights barely worked, and the place smelled damp. There was an old washer and dryer in the corner, and this huge wooden cabinet against one wall. It felt off, like it didn't belong there. When I came back up, Melissa had already started dinner. We ate on the couch with the fireplace crackling and Elf playing on the TV. For a while, everything felt perfect, like nothing could go wrong. But then, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a casual knock. It was firm, loud, like whoever was outside wanted to make sure we heard them. Melissa froze. Who the hell knocks in the middle of a snowstorm? Good question, I said, getting up. I opened the door just a crack, and there he was. The guy looked about 40, maybe a little older. He was wearing this beat-up brown coat and a beanie that didn't quite cover his shaggy hair. His boots were caked with snow, and he had this odd smile, like he wasn't sure if he should be there. "Hey," he said, his voice low and rough. "I'm Robert. I help take care of the place. Just wanted to make sure you folks are settled in." I glanced back at Melissa. She was sitting up now, watching him like a hawk. Yeah, we're good," I said. "Thanks." Good, he said, nodding. "Storm like this, you never know. Power goes out sometimes." He lingered for a second, then added, "If you need anything, I'm just down the road." And then he walked off, disappearing into the snow like he'd never been there. Melissa came up behind me as I locked the door. "That was weird," she said. "Yeah," I muttered. "Real weird." We tried to brush it off, but the rest of the night felt wrong. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside, it all felt louder, closer, like we weren't as alone as we thought. The next morning the storm had eased up, but the snow was deep. Melissa was still in bed when I went outside to clear the car. That's when I saw them. Footprints. They started near the edge of the woods, circled the cabin, and stopped by the living room window. I stood there for a minute, my breath fogging up in the freezing air. The tracks were fresh, not covered by snow, which meant whoever made them had been there recently. I rushed back inside and woke Melissa. "You need to see this." She followed me to the window, her face pale when she saw the tracks. Who would walk around the cabin in the middle of the night? "I don't know," I said. But I couldn't shake the image of Robert. That night, we heard it again. Footsteps. This time they were on the deck. Melissa clutched my arm. "Someone's out there," she whispered. I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing. No one. Just snow blowing across the deck. I turned to go back inside, and that's when I saw it. The basement door. It was open. "Did you go down there?" I asked Melissa. "No," she said, her voice shaking. I grabbed the flashlight and headed downstairs. The basement was even colder than before. And that cabinet? The doors were slightly open, just enough to see inside. There were photos. Old, black and white photos of people, families mostly, standing in front of the cabin. But the faces were scratched out. I slammed the cabinet shut and ran back upstairs. The next day we tried to act normal, but it was impossible. Every little sound made us jump. That afternoon, Melissa spotted him. A figure standing at the edge of the woods. "Is it Robert?" she whispered. "I don't think so," I said. The figure didn't move. It just stood there watching. That night the power went out. The cabin was pitch black except for the faint glow of the snow outside. And then the banging started. It wasn't just the door this time. It was the windows, the walls. Like someone or something was trying to get in. Melissa was crying, clutching my arm as I grabbed the car keys. "We're leaving," I said. We grabbed what we could and ran for the car. As I started the engine, the headlights lit up the porch. Robert was standing there. But behind him there was something else, a shadow, taller and darker than any person should be. It didn't move. It just stared. I hit the gas and we tore out of there. Later, Mike called. The police found nothing. No Robert, no footprints. Just the photos in the cabinet, scattered across the basement floor. And on the back of each photo, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Safe Haven." It all happened on Christmas Eve back in '97. I was 9 years old and my little brother Ben had just turned 6. For us, Christmas Eve wasn't anything special. We're Jewish, so while the rest of the neighborhood was stringing up lights and preparing for Santa, it was just another night at home. Our dad, being a doctor, always took shifts during the holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving, all of them. That night he was working at the hospital, leaving me and Ben alone. Well, technically Mom was home, but she wasn't really there, you know? She'd been staying at Grandma's to help her recover from surgery. It was just the two of us. Ben and I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, flipping through channels. The neighborhood outside was lit up like something out of a movie. Houses glowing with Christmas lights, fake snowmen in yards, and families sitting by their windows. Ours? Pitch black except for the dim light of the TV. Around 8:30 I heard it, a knock at the door. Not just a casual knock, but one of those loud, deliberate ones, like whoever it was really wanted to be let in. I froze. "Who's at the door, Leah?" Ben whispered, his big eyes darting toward the hallway. "I don't know," I said. "Stay here." Our front door had these frosted glass panels, so if you got close enough, you could sort of see who was standing outside. As I crept up to the door, my heart was pounding so loud I swore whoever was out there could hear it. Standing on the porch was a man dressed as Santa Claus. He had on the full red suit, white beard, and a sack slung over his shoulder. When he saw me through the glass, he grinned and waved like we were old friends. "Hey kid," he called out. "It's me, Santa. Open up. I've got presents for you and your brother." I didn't open the door. Something about him felt off. "We're Jewish," I said, my voice shaking. "We don't celebrate Christmas." The man's grin didn't fade. "Oh, I know," he said. "That's why I'm here. This year Santa's delivering presents to everyone, even kids who don't celebrate." Ben, of course, was bouncing off the couch by now. "Leah, let him in, he's got presents." "No," I snapped, my eyes still locked on the man. "We're not supposed to open the door for strangers." The man's cheerful demeanor started to change. His grin faded and his voice got sharper. "Come on, kid, just let me in. I promise I've got something special for you." I shook my head. "You should leave," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Open the door, Leah," he said again, this time with a tone that made my stomach twist. I backed away, heart racing. "Ben, call Dad," I whispered. But then I remembered. Dad didn't have a cell phone back then. We were on our own. Ben and I stayed huddled on the couch, hoping the man would go away. But about 10 minutes later, there it was again, the knocking. Only this time it was louder, angrier. "Leah," Ben whimpered, clutching my arm. "What if he gets in?" I didn't know what to say. I tried the phone, but the line was dead. Great, just great. "Hey," the man shouted from outside. "I know you're in there. Open this door right now or you're gonna regret it." My mind was spinning. What was I supposed to do? The guy was banging so hard on the door I thought it might break. "Stay here," I told Ben. "I'm gonna figure something out." I ran around the house, making sure all the windows were locked and the back door was bolted. My brain was going a mile a minute. Then it hit me, the smoke alarm. Dad had once told me that if a fire alarm goes off, it automatically alerts the fire department. If I could set it off, help might come. I grabbed a couple of old candles from the kitchen drawer and a matchbook. Ben was watching me like I'd lost my mind. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Just trust me," I said. I lit the candles and held them under the smoke alarm. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a loud, piercing screech filled the house. "Is there a fire?" Ben screamed. "No, it's fake. But now the fire department will come." We crouched by the stairs waiting. Outside, the knocking had stopped. The man must have heard the alarm too. A few minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The firefighters had arrived. Ben and I stayed put as they approached the house. But when I peeked out, my stomach dropped. The guy was still there. "I'm their dad," he was shouting at the firefighters. "I came home early to surprise them, but I locked myself out. Please, you've got to help me get in." The firefighters looked skeptical, but one of them started toward the door with a crowbar. "No!" I screamed, throwing the door open just a crack. "He's not our dad. He's lying." The firefighters stopped. One of them knelt down to look at me. "Are you okay, kid?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "We're Jewish. We don't even celebrate Christmas. That guy's not my dad. I don't know who he is." I pointed to my necklace, a small Star of David, and then to the menorah on the table behind me. The firefighter turned back to the man. "You've got some explaining to do." The guy was arrested and the police stayed with us until Dad came home. He was furious about everything, the dead phone line, the fact that we were left alone, but mostly, he was relieved we were safe. Looking back, I don't know what that man's plan was, but I know it wasn't good. If we'd opened the door that night, who knows what would have happened. Sometimes I still think about it when Christmas rolls around. I'll see decorations and hear carolers, and I'll be reminded of that Santa suit. But more than anything, I feel grateful. Grateful for my little brother, grateful for my dad, and grateful that even on the scariest night of my life, I somehow found the courage to keep us safe. I'm not even sure where to begin with this story. It's been years, but every time Christmas rolls around, the memories resurface, sharp and vivid. I was there that night, December 24th, in a picturesque little town called Harmonyville. The Ramirez family was hosting their legendary Christmas Eve party, the kind of gathering everyone in town talked about for weeks in advance. The mansion was dazzling, decked out in twinkling lights, garlands, and ornaments. From the driveway, you could hear the music and laughter spilling into the cold night air. I wasn't there as a close friend or a cherished guest. My cousin Maria worked as a housekeeper for the Ramirezes and managed to get me an invite. Walking into that grand house, I felt like an outsider. The floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the air smelled like cinnamon and pine. Guests were dressed to impress. Children darted around clutching candy canes, and a massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, its ornaments glittering like jewels. It was perfect, or so it seemed. What no one knew was that a shadow loomed outside. Someone uninvited had shown up, watching from the darkness. A man dressed as Santa Claus stood beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. But he wasn't there to spread holiday cheer. He had other plans. Harmonyville, like most small towns, thrived on gossip. The Ramirez family was no stranger to whispered rumors, especially Lisa Ramirez. Lisa had once been married to Ethan, a successful engineer with a charming smile and a reputation for generosity. They were Harmonyville's golden couple until their marriage crumbled in a very public, messy divorce. Ethan lost everything: his job, his house, and many believed his sense of self. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed to thrive after the split, building a new life for herself and her children. The rumors about Ethan grew darker over time. Some said he couldn't let go of his resentment toward Lisa. Others claimed he'd become obsessed, blaming her for his downfall. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The Ethan Pruitt who arrived at the Ramirez mansion that Christmas Eve wasn't the man people used to know. Inside, the party buzzed with warmth and laughter. I tried to blend in, sticking close to Maria as she served drinks and hors d'oeuvres. That's when I saw him. The Santa suit wasn't unusual. Several guests were dressed in festive outfits. But there was something about the way he moved, his slow, deliberate steps, that unsettled me. His presence didn't spark joy. It sent a shiver down my spine. At first, he blended in well enough. Kids flocked to him, tugging at his red coat and asking for presents. Adults chuckled and snapped pictures, assuming he was part of the evening's entertainment. But his eyes told a different story: cold, calculating, and devoid of the holiday spirit. When he approached Lisa, the mood shifted. She was by the fireplace, chatting with her brother David. Her smile froze when she saw him, her face draining of color. For a moment, I thought she might yell or call for security, but instead, she stood motionless as he handed her a large, beautifully wrapped gift. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Whatever he said made her tremble. Lisa tried to compose herself, but I saw the panic in her eyes. The box sat by the fireplace, its glossy paper catching the light. Lisa couldn't seem to tear her eyes away from it. Ethan, meanwhile, stationed himself in the corner, watching her like a predator stalking its prey. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The festive music and chatter seemed like a distant hum as I watched the tension between them grow. It happened suddenly. Ethan stepped into the center of the room and pulled off his Santa beard, revealing a face twisted with rage. "Lisa," he called, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. The room fell silent. "I brought you a gift, something you truly deserve." All eyes turned to him. Lisa tried to speak, but no words came out. Ethan pointed to the gift box by the fireplace. "Open it," he demanded, his voice a low growl. Lisa hesitated, her hands trembling. "Please, Ethan," she whispered. "Not here." "Open it now." His voice was cold and final. Reluctantly, she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a tangle of wires, blinking lights, and a timer counting down from 10 minutes. The realization hit everyone at once. It was a bomb. Chaos erupted. People screamed and scrambled for the exits, but Ethan brandished a gun, firing a shot into the ceiling. "Nobody moves," he shouted. "You're all going to witness what she's done to me." Lisa begged him to stop, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, please, don't do this. Think of the kids." But Ethan was beyond reason. "You think I care? You took everything from me, Lisa. My career, my reputation, my future. Now I'm taking it all back." While he was distracted, David inched closer to him. Meanwhile, Maria was texting the police, her hands shaking so badly I thought she'd drop her phone. My heart pounded in my chest as I hid behind a couch, paralyzed by fear. David made his move, tackling Ethan to the ground. The gun skidded across the floor, but Ethan fought back with a ferocity I didn't expect. He managed to wrestle free and retrieve the weapon, firing a warning shot that grazed David's shoulder. "Nice try," Ethan sneered, dragging David to his feet. "Anyone else?" The timer ticked down. 3 minutes left. Red and blue lights flashed outside as the police arrived, shouting through a megaphone. "Ethan Pruitt, this is the Harmonyville Police Department. Come out with your hands up." Ethan laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Too late," he muttered. "It's too late for all of you." Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Let the kids go, Ethan, please. They don't deserve this." For a moment, it seemed like she reached him. His grip on the gun wavered, but then his face hardened. "No. Nobody walks away." One of the guests, a father of 3, lunged at Ethan. The room exploded into chaos again. Ethan fired, hitting the man in the leg, but the distraction gave David enough time to grab the bomb and sprint toward the door. Ethan followed, but the police were ready. The moment he stepped outside, they opened fire. Ethan collapsed on the lawn, the gun falling from his hand. David handed the bomb to the officers, who disarmed it with just 15 seconds to spare. The days that followed were a blur. The Ramirez mansion became a crime scene, its holiday decorations a haunting reminder of what happened. Reporters swarmed the town, broadcasting headlines like "Christmas Eve Terror in Harmonyville." Lisa turned her grief into action, founding a support group for victims of domestic abuse. Her strength inspired the community to heal, even as scars lingered. As for me, I'm still haunted by that night. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the smallest acts of courage can save lives. And in a world full of bitterness, a little kindness can go a long way. Stay safe, and Merry Christmas.